some of these critics, these pundits.
Generally speaking, I'd be a fan of off the ball.
Exactly, and like Tommy knows his football, obviously I listen to football pod the odd time, and
when I was looking at the power rankings, and I thought that Jesus Owen must still be feeling the effects of these mushrooms.
They just dismiss you like you have nothing to do with the bloody occasion.
No mushrooms today, Tommy Rooney. Good morning to you. Oh, you're on mute.
Not today, Ger. Good morning. How are you? Hi, Johnny.
Very well.
Thanks.
No controversies this week. Although we should. RTE have had to fire back at the Louth lads, saying that there's no conspiracy against them, and that there was just an administrative issue that prevented them from being there for the historic Louth surge. RTE last night denied claims their lack of coverage of high-flying Louth's Division 2 campaign is related to a long-running dispute with Mickey Hart. Gavin Devlin, Hart's right-hand man in Louth, believes the issue is down to an historic disagreement with Hart and urged RTE to see it through a Louth lens. He understands why leading figures in the county are annoyed that Louth are the only side in Division 2 not to have received any RTE television coverage this spring. Louth go to Croke Park on Sunday to face Dublin. Obviously they'll get that one, you know. So let's get to, because Louth I think are one of the big risers this week, right?
They're one of the big risers, and for the people in Louth, they can be happy to know that Paddy Andrews took a stand for them this week. He's sick of not having any Louth footage to go off, so he is going to Croke Park.
Oh, hi Bailey. What does Bailey think of...
This is Bailey's time for a walk in the morning, Ger, so I might be in a little bit of bother on her this morning.
What age is Bailey, actually?
Bailey's just over 2, Johnny.
It'll be
so
good,
he's,
like, she or she?
It's a he. He's got the loveliest eyelashes in the world as well. They're about 2 foot long.
I'm looking forward to when he's like getting on a bit and you can call him Old Bailey, you know.
Hey.
Oh, I can't wait for that as well.
Was that on purpose? Is there like a legal thing? Rumpole. There's a reference. Right.
I got it. Don't be saying I didn't get that. I got that. I'm just trying to get somebody to get the dog.
It wasn't so much. It wasn't so much you as our audience are all like, oh my god. But it was when I was growing up, we had 2 channels and everything was on repeat. So I'm very familiar with stuff from like the 50s and 60s of BBC that RT were always getting for nothing, that were like just on heavy duty repeat. And like, well, this looks very old, but like seems to just about be in colour.
One of my earliest memories is like Liverpool v Crewe in a cup game, and I found it on YouTube where like it was the way it was the worst. Like BBC was just coming in, you could vaguely see it, and Liverpool won like 4-0 in those old green Carlsberg jerseys. But like we had 2 channels, we literally had 2 channels,
yeah, including
the national anthem and
the end of the night,
religious thing they had at the end of the night.
A prayer before bedtime. Right, let's get going.
There are a fair few changes here, lads. So yeah, we'll get into it. I'll run you through them really quickly. So are we on slide 4?
We are on slide 4.
Okay, so the Waterford footballers got their first win in over 600 days at the weekend. Went under the radar a little. They bet London by 2-9 to 2-5. They did incredibly well. Had a black card and conceded a penalty, I think, in the first half. So Aoife Fitzgerald and Waterford, fair play. Big thing to get that first win off the back. So they've now replaced London and they've moved into 31st place. Their first move in the power rankings, I would imagine, in a long time, even under the stewardship of Owen Sheehan. Tipperary have continued to slide back. They're in 27th place. Relegation was confirmed at the weekend with defeat to Offaly. Wicklow are up 1 to 26th. Despite another late draw, Wicklow still have a great shot at promotion. And if they beat Waterford and Sligo beat Leitrim, Oisin McConville will have secured promotion in his first year as manager. So big move for Wicklow. Laois lost to Leitrim. They've slipped back 1, and it could have been so simple if they'd beaten them. If they'd held on and beaten them, they would have promotion in their own hands. Likewise at Wicklow, if they had held off Wexford and beaten them by a point, they would have promotion in their own hands. They're pipped at the death by Leitrim, and now they need a win against London, plus a Sligo defeat, and hope that Wicklow don't catch them on score difference. That's how Division 4 is looking. The other 2, when we get on to the next slide, we've got Leitrim in 24th position. They're up 2. Another brilliant win. They held off Laois at home. They had a habit over the last couple of weeks of taking a lead in the middle of the second half and just falling away in the last 15 minutes. This time they went 5 up with 15 minutes to go and they won by 2. So good signs in Leitrim, and they're in a do-or-die clash at home once more against a tabletop in Sligo. I would argue that Carrick and Shannon, again, it's not being televised, so Loud fans, it can be emphasised, but I would argue that Carrick and Shannon is the only place to be this Sunday at 1 o'clock.
What stamp is he putting on the team?
So we've had very little footage to go off, Johnny, but I can tell you that I had a look at some of the Wicklow game, and they play a very direct style. They've got a superstar with Keith Byrne there, and Keith Byrne was named in the team of the week 4 weeks in a row. They're not afraid to go direct to Byrne. against Laois in the last couple of minutes when Laois were on the attack. Byrne won 2 unbelievable marks, kicked 2 huge scores in the last couple of minutes. They have a clutch forward there. They're a very valuable commodity in every division in Gaelic football. But if you've got somebody who can put the ball over the bar in Division 4 and you know how to get the best out of them, you're going to do well. And Leitrim are doing that with Keith Byrne. They've got a really athletic middle third, which is really important. And yeah, they play a fairly direct style of football. Some of the scores in that Wicklow game, like Paul Keeney scored a point from 55 yards with the outside of the right boot. He wasn't afraid to take the shot.
That Andy would have been proud of.
I'm not sure if Andy Moran would have even taken that shot on, but Keeney took it on. And a few minutes later, the wing back, I can't remember exactly who had the ball, drove a 50-yard ball into Keith Byrne, who skinned the full back, dummied the goalkeeper and put it in the back of the net. Now Wicklow came back and beat them, but they're obviously playing with a bit of freedom, a bit of abandon, a bit of confidence, and I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing them this weekend. I'm hoping to get up to the game on Sunday.
Let's keep going. Come on.
So Sligo 23rd, Antrim, one of the results of the weekend, they bet Cavan. They secured their position in Division 3. Armagh fans, don't sleep on Antrim. They've been quietly one of the most improved teams in the division this year. They had a poor year last year. They've bounced back this year. They've lost 2 games in injury time, but they're safe. Leitrim have slid back to 21st. It's been a really... They've slid back Limerick. 3 points, actually.
Sorry, yeah, Limerick, yeah.
Limerick, sorry. It's been a really tough 2023 so far. Relegation confirmed at the weekend as they failed to turn over Kildare after they bombed out the manager, so they didn't get the manager bounce that they were hoping for. Down have slid back 1. Down have been really unlucky. I tipped them at the start of the year to go up. They've preserved their 100% home record with another win, but a costly late defeat to Fermanagh means that they cannot secure promotion on the last day because of the head-to-head rule. They need to reach the Ulster final this year to compete for SAM, and they've got Donegal in that Ulster quarter-final, which I'm saying to keep an eye on, and I've said that from January. Offaly are up 2 places. Offaly ended an incredibly difficult week last week after the passing of their manager Liam Kearns by beating Tipperary and leaving themselves in with a really good shot of promotion in the final day against Down. They're up against Down in the last game. Fermanagh in 18th place, one of the stories of the league, 5 wins and a defeat. Another win at the weekend. They held off Westmeath, who have been really disappointing in the league, you'd have to say. And now they have to beat Cavan on the final day to go up. So for Fermanagh, it's simple. You beat Cavan, who are already promoted and may have an eye on the league final already. You beat Cavan and you go up. But if Fermanagh lose to Cavan and Offaly beat Down, Offaly will join Cavan in Division 2 next year. Cavan have slid back 2 places to -2. They were 10 points down at the weekend to Antrim. They came back and lost by 1. Maybe they already have an eye on Ulster in the league final. It's looking like they may have to reach the league final to get to SAM unless Westmeath get to the Leinster final, and then that position becomes free. It is still quite a complicated system. We'll know about 9 teams that are in Sam Maguire.
Yeah, the Ulster final, yeah. Go on.
The weekend. So, Kildare, after quite a slide over the last couple of weeks, I am giving them their kudos. They got their 3 goals, their first 3 goals of the league. They're into 16th place. They got the job done on Limerick. It was not convincing, but they got the job done. And beating Meath next week, I would argue, is important for a couple of reasons. It's important for your positioning in Division 2. And if Kildare don't want to play in Sam Maguire, and I put it to James O'Donoghue and Paddy Anderson, the football pod last night, would it be a good thing for teams like Meath and Kildare to compete in Sam? Well, should they actually compete there? The lads actually felt that the profile of the Meath team meant, I think the average age I put to them is around 24, meant that maybe Sam Maguire or Tailteann Cup could be the good right thing for Meath, because they were so naive and... there is clearly talent there, but for the Kildare players and fellas that are stock of Daniel Flynn, Kevin Flynn,
Kerwin,
Kevin Feely, Dara Kerwin, players that are a little bit older, that are a little bit more settled, they need to be competing in Sam Maguire and showing what they're about. So Kildare in 16th place, and that's a big game next weekend against...
I think I might be in full agreement with Bailey that Meath are getting a bit of a soft ride here after their performance last weekend. I don't know if...
we'll get to that in a second. Westmeath have slid back 2 places. Promotion's out of reach. They will compete in SAM. It's been a very weird league. They've scored 13 goals. They've conceded 1. I had them in for promotion with Cavan. It's been a bit of a letdown now, Westmeath.
Westmeath have let the air come out of the balloon, because everybody talks about the scenes last year when they won the Tailteann Cup, and then obviously some of their club teams went deep, and you thought, okay, this is the rising tide, and Division 2 football is next. Have a season in Division 2 where you kind of establish yourselves, but that didn't happen. They're now an established Division 3 side, and they'll be back in the Tailteann Cup next year. almost irrespective of what happens.
100%, Ger. And it's the yo-yo continues. And that's what you're trying to break for a lot of these counties. You're trying to just reach beyond mediocrity and get a bit of momentum behind you. And we'll get to a team now that have done it remarkably well since 2021 in Louth. But Westmeath back to 15th. I can't see them getting much higher than that. I got a lot of stick for having them quite high early on, but that's where I felt they deserved to be at the start of the season. So,
and they let you down.
Come at me. In 14th place, this hurt, but I do actually think it's fair. Meath are in 14th place. I actually couldn't move them any further. And it just shows the stock of teams around this position. There are a lot of teams that aren't playing well at the minute. And what did you expect at the weekend? You probably expected Meath to have a better structure. It was actually alarming how easy they made it for Dublin. It was such a disappointment. Colin O'Rourke spoke about it last July, that beating Dublin as a Meath footballer is still the litmus test, you could say. He doubled down on it in the Tommy Tiernan show in February and said that man-to-man battles, could you go and play against them? That was the big thing. And it just seems like Meath are set up to fail at the weekend.
Where is Colin O'Rourke at the moment?
Colin O'Rourke is at... Colin O'Rourke is there's a really good team around Colin O'Rourke. And Stephen Bray, Barry Callaghan, Paul Garrigan and Shane Wall. I feel like they need to look at the Derry defeat. They need to look at the Dublin defeat. Take the positives and the negatives from the league. It's very early on, but they need to possibly set up the way they did in the second half, which is much more secure, but it was far too late. I feel like there is a bit of a... There's a full back line there, two 21-year-olds and a 27-year-old, all in their first year playing intercounty football.
And did they not fall out with the best full-back in the country, who apparently is down in Australia?
I don't know. I don't know if there was a fallout there. I have to do a bit of digging on that, but it is fair to say that Conor McGill was one of the
club player of the year,
strongest club player of the year in Meath. He was the captain who retold the club championship, the club champions. One of the strongest footballers, you could say, in the Meath, in the county. You could say that condition, some people were saying, was an issue against the Dubs. I tell you one thing, Conor McGill would have no problem with conditioning. He's one of the most athletic fullbacks in the country. I can't tell you what happened. I don't know what happened there. Well, I don't know why he's not in the squad. But you're missing fellas like McGill. Brian Menton wasn't convinced to come back, as far as I know. And he's another player who is a real leader and a rock in the middle of that team. You would have heard me argue for years under Andy McEntee that Meath were better than they were given credit for, and they were coming up against the greatest Dublin team of all time. And I felt like Meath deserved a bit more credit for how they were getting on, and they weren't far off. They were trying a system. Now that hit its peak and it slid backwards, but the complete spine of what McEntee had done has been completely ripped out. And I've been saying since the start under O'Rourke that a marriage of styles is needed. I do think that the players, there's a very young core of players coming through. They're very, 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 very talented. They do need a bit of they do need to be allowed to express themselves and play with a bit of freedom. But the complete spine has been written out of what Meath have done for 6 years, and I don't think that should have been done.
O'Rourke is in danger of becoming Gary Neville at Valencia. That's what is happening at the moment, and so he needs to get a grip of the situation really quickly and decide what they want to be. Do they want to play modern football that's ready for the challenges of Division 2? Bear in mind, this is Division 2 we're talking about, where they're getting hockeyed in games, and we'll see come Championship what happens, but it's careering off path quickly. And look,
I'm going to put on the record before the clip goes out. You said Gary Neville, not me. Just before this clips up and my name gets put to it, you said Gary Neville, not me. But I would say that management team have to be good enough to recognise the lessons that they've learned so far, and they've got to be able to turn this around.
To be fair, it is a management team.
Well, Rourke has to, you look at the way the Louth players talk about Mickey Hart. It's not just Mickey Hart. They talk about Gavin Devlin, horse they call him, being, and they believe, the best coach in the country. And James O'Donoghue said on the pod this week, it doesn't matter if he's the best coach or not. All that matters is that you believe it. And it's such a powerful thing when a group of players and a management team are all moving in the same direction. And I have to say, for me,
that's the placebo effect.
Very early. It's very early. It's very early, Ger.
Okay,
it's Division 2. It's up and down.
Could be too late.
And I think it's fair that Meath are 14th. I don't think Meath should be any worse.
Well, I think if Kildare beat them this weekend, they should definitely be behind them. They fluked a draw against Limerick, who are not even on the same sheet as them.
They probably should have beaten Limerick, to be honest. I watched that game back. They should have beaten Limerick. And Limerick were buoyed, I would imagine, by the fact that as a team, as a group, powerfully they had decided to get rid of Ray Dempsey. But
he was still in charge for that game, wasn't he?
Yeah, but I would say that the meeting had already happened for the Limerick players, and I think there's a bit of freedom there for Limerick. So
interesting take.
Okay.
That was, I think they got their manager bounced before Kildare came
They
in.
are gymnastics. That is Nadia Comaneci, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay,
Perfect 10.
gymnastics. Okay, but I do think Meath are 14th in the country, and I actually think if they get into the Tailteann Cup, they deserve to be in the Tailteann Cup, and they may fall there even if they beat Kildare, because if Cork beat Derry, Cork will get 4th place, and that should be enough.
Luckily, the game's in Newbridge from Meath's perspective, and Kildare's record there is horrific at the moment. Let's move on, because there's actually Division 1 that we should be talking about.
Exactly, and it's a sorry argument to be getting into about who's going to win between Meath and Kildare, because they're just
two ball men fighting over a comb, as my ma would say.
But I'm going to say the Meath under 20s had a big win last night. They held off Longford in difficult conditions, and they've struggled against Longford. So there is hope in Meath, because there are young footballers coming through, but it's just something has to be tweaked over what's happened. Lessons have to be learned.
Let's move on to the teams that matter
13th place, Clare. People are going to say I should have Clare lower, and I probably should, but I talk about Meath being lucky, and they probably are the luckiest team in Division 3. They should be in Division 2. They should be in a relegation battle this weekend. If they had drawn to Limerick, if they hadn't turned over Cork in that last 15 minutes in the first game, and we saw what Cork have done since, Clare should have a shot at staying up, but you make your own luck in many ways, and they've completely run out of steam in the last couple of weeks. They have one last hope to stay in Sam Maguire, and when you argue with the profile of a team, I think this Clare team fancy themselves as a side who would have a crack in an All-Ireland series and a round-robin series. They got to the last 8 last year, but they're in Division 3 next year, so that's where they're at, and they're going to have to bounce back from a tough position. They've had 8 years in Division 2. It's the first relegation under Colin Collins, but 2 defeats to Kildare and Dublin by a point in round 3 and 4 were key. So Cork in Munster, quarter-final, April 9th. I'm telling you, that's another game to keep an eye on. Championship games are coming thick and fast, and that is going to be a cracker in the Munster quarter-final. So 12th position, the moment Louth fans have been waiting for. I was reminded last night, lads, that I actually gave Louth an outside shot at Leinster last year. So I'm just putting that out there, that I give them an outside shot at Leinster. So I don't deserve all the stick I've been getting for having Louth where they were. I'll be honest, I didn't fully believe that they would be able to do what they've done this year. And that is credit to what Mickey Hart and Gavin Devlin have done, and to what that group of players have done, because they are missing their 2 marquee men.
Yeah.
They're missing Kieran Byrne, who played professional football for 6 years, and I can imagine sets so many standards around that group, and maintains them, and it's so important to have around the place. And they're missing Samuel Roy, their talisman, who is out with a hamstring injury. They're missing 2 or 3 others. Like, I watched them against Clare. They had 3 first-half injury-enforced substitutions that day. Same against Meath. They had 3 first-half injury-enforced substitutions. They're down to the thin bones of their panel, and they are operating like it doesn't matter. And the manner in which they're set up, like, they're crying. Like, the likes of Meath and Clare are crying out to have a setup the way they're allowed to have. Like, last year they conceded every kick out, and this year they've got a full court press with their goalkeeper winning kick outs in midfield. They just believe in what they're doing, and it's such a powerful thing. And they are rightfully, I'm going to say it right now, I didn't say it last week because I actually thought Cork would turn them over and it would save me a couple of weeks. I wanted to wait until the Leinster quarter-final till they face Westmeath. Louth are the second best team in Leinster at the minute. I don't think it's the greatest, trophy to be winning, but they deserve to be there, and they've earned it, because they've gone from Division 4 in 2021 to being on the verge of making it to Division 1 in 2023. And Dublin had it all their own way last week against Meath. And I hope it filled them with a false sense of security, because there is no hope in hell that Louth are going to give it to them their own way in Croke Park this weekend.
You'd much rather be Louth than Kildare or Meath at the moment, so I don't think it's that controversial, and Westmeath as well after the league campaign. So, okay, let's keep going. Yeah,
so Louth are in 12th position. Cork are in 11th. They lost at the weekend. I would argue that Cork, again, luck comes into it, but Cork were unlucky at the weekend. They were in a very commanding position against Louth. Conceded a penalty before half-time. It was missed. Rebound was scored. They had a man sent off. Louth got the benefit of playing against 14 men for the entire second half for the second or third week in a row, and that in Gaelic football is a big thing. Donegal are in 10th position. We know what's going on in Donegal. Not worth talking about there, going back into it. Monaghan are in 9th. I think they're going to join Donegal in Division 2 next year. Roscommon have slipped back one more, even though they put on a decent showing against Kerry. It's a wee slide, but they can still reach the league final, albeit it's a long shot if results go their way and they beat Donegal. Might be worth talking about these two. Tyrone are up one place. I've been impressed with how they've bounced back after that limp defeat to Castlebar. I was at that game against Mayo, and it was alarming, the systems malfunction that had unfolded in front of us. But it's a very interesting game against Armagh next week, and we'll get a good gauge of where both Armagh and Tyrone are really at, because Tyrone have bounced back. Armagh, it's like, I don't think Armagh are far away, and I can really understand why they've done what they've done. I know people are probably frustrated with it. We all loved Armagh last year. I talked Armagh up plenty. We loved the way they played football. There was a box office rockstar element to it. And I think they sat down and they looked at what happened against Galway and in a lot of their other games, and they were far too reliant on emerging out of the chaos, the right side of it. And maybe they want to bring a bit more control into what they're doing. And that's what they've tried to do. They've set up a lot more defensively. They've become a lot more conservative with the ball. James and Paddy are begging them to let loose this weekend and show us that they still have what they had last year, because that is what made Armagh special. I think we will see it, because Armagh are in danger of going down if Monaghan managed to turn over Mayo. And I know Shane describes Monaghan as the cockroach of the Division 1, and it's a fair moniker. I don't think that's going to happen this week. I think Armagh will be safe either way, but I do think Armagh are going to throw the shackles off, and we've mentioned it before, momentum. When the championship is so close and they've got Antrim coming up, Armagh need a performance and a result this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they're doing a heavy block of training and they're not tapering for these games and they don't give a shite about the league. And that's a totally fair way to go about things. But I think we were chatting about this earlier on in the week. It's a long era that we've had with Geezer there, and a national trophy at the end of that to say this is progress. Like, I wouldn't be terribly surprised if they limp out of Ulster and then we see something brilliant from them in the round robin. That's not a million miles away from how Geezer has, like, traditionally over the 14 years of his managerial career. That's how the season has worked out for them. Okay, let's keep going.
It could happen. Well, it's worth hanging on this point for a second.
So I think Tyrone are back, by the way. I mean, I was getting absolutely hammered last season when I was like, this Tyrone team, they're not the shit All-Ireland champions that everybody says they are. They're actually really good. They've got a spine of brilliant players, and no, this is the worst All-Ireland final I've ever seen. They're the worst team since Cork 2010 to win. And then it was like, you go back and you watch those Cork Kerry games, and that Cork team were amazing, who were very unfortunate not to win more than that. So I don't know. I think
sorry, I totally agree with you that they were full value for their All-Ireland win.
Tyrone are back.
But no, hold on, let's not discount last year. Last year they tanked. That was one of the poorest All-Ireland defences we've seen in a long time. And it can happen. And let's park that. Are they back? They're showing signs. And I do think that one of the positives, and I'm not sure if you've seen much from Ger, but Darragh Canavan is starting to grab the bull by the horns, and Rory is getting a couple of minutes every game. And I think that the two of them are going to have a big influence over them this year. And some of the younger lads like Cormac Quinn are starting to solidify themselves and put a bit of energy back into this Tyrone team. So
maybe they were a season ahead. You win nothing with kids. But this year, they're not kids anymore. So, okay, very quickly.
Possibly. So, very quickly. Okay, Derry are 5th, Dublin are 4th, Mayo are 3rd, Galway are 2nd, Kerry are 1st. We can have an argument here if you want, right? But what you said there about Armagh, the training block, was interesting. I put it to James every week now, are you worried about Kerry? Are you worried about Kerry? No, Kerry are flat. Nothing to worry about. James says, big training block coming up now. That's what Kerry are focused on. They're not playing, they're going to play Tipper Waterford in the 3rd week of April. The Dubs, I think, are out the 3rd week of April as well. Maybe it's not the worst thing, and I'm not saying they're going to do it or it's going to happen, but if Armagh were to lose to Antrim, they would have a month, minimum, 5-6 weeks, until they're in the All-Ireland round robin series, and then they're guaranteed 3 games. That's the way the setup is this year. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for an Ulster side who are guaranteed to play in Sam to lose early doors and get their training block in like in previous years. It might be the most straightforward way for a team to get conditioned properly, because the calendar is so insane this year. It's so hard to know exactly where teams are at, especially the teams that are expecting to be in the latter end of the championship.
I hadn't thought about that from a Mayo perspective. Maybe that's the right thing for them to do as well. Because they can win a gazillion games to get to an All-Ireland semi-final or final and then find themselves completely depleted. Or they can lose in the first round of the Connacht Championship and have a month off.
And that is a very good comparison, because the way I looked at this earlier in the year, I think Armagh could win the All-Ireland this year in 13 games because they're playing in the preliminary round in Ulster. Galway, who are already in the Connacht semi-final, could do it in 8. That's the way it is. If they go clean through. If Armagh go to back door, or if they go clean through Ulster, it's 13 games.
Ulster says no. Ulster says no to a fair championship. Ulster says no, they don't want Proposal B. Ulster says no, screw you. We need to punish our teams for playing all these games in Ulster. What were they thinking? Anyway.
And it's the exact same for a Clare or a Limerick, who are now in Division 3 and looking at the Tailteann Cup, the same way that Cavan down Fermanagh, who all have had a bit of momentum. Clare and Limerick, is going the other way. But Clare and Limerick only need to win. Clare need to beat Cork and then beat Limerick to get to a Munster final and retain their place in Sam. Cavan or Fermanagh are on the, a much tougher proposition.
More of that goodness, of course, on the Football Pod with Tommy and Paddy and James. Tommy, good stuff. Non-contentious power rankings. Thanks very much. That's this week's episode. And Bailey.
Tommy knows his football, obviously. Listen to Football Pod the odd time.
And I was looking at the power rankings and I thought that Jesus Owen must still be feeling the effects of these mushrooms.